Well, with that, I think we can start the interview. Everything's looking and sounding good. So, all right, let me, okay, things are recording. Cool. All right. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. And today you're joining us for an exclusive conversation and interview with Mike Lindsay and Laura Marling of the duo Lump, who have a brand new record out titled Animal. We're going to talk about that and anything else that comes up in the conversation. Yes, we are having in the middle of the afternoon on Twitch a Euro-friendly stream. I'm sorry that our streams are usually pretty late over here in the US, but we had to make time for our wonderful guests, of course. First off, let's welcome Mike and Laura to the stream. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so Animal is out now. Record is fresh out. It's been out a week. Have you guys had time to kind of take in the reception of the record so far?
Have you, Laura?
Sort of, I guess. It's felt like it's been a long build-up since we recorded it nearly 2 years ago. So it feels like just a huge relief for it to be out now. And the anticipation is over.
So the process, the creative process on this one was completely like based in a point in time that was immediately after the first Lump record.
Well, yeah.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I guess it was 2019. We were in this room sort of jigsaw puzzling together the new Animal. Yeah.
And I'm sorry. I keep forgetting it's a new year and that the last year has basically been effectively a blur.
Yeah.
So sorry. Time for me is the last several years is an abstract concept for me right now. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, it is for everybody. I think that's why it feels strange to say 2 years and not last year.
Yeah.
You know? But let's just say last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, let's. So going into this new LP, with the first album in mind and under your belts, like what were instrumentally and conceptually like your ambitions going into this new project? Like what did you seek to achieve or expand the Lump universe with that you maybe didn't get the opportunity to the first time around?
Well, I think we had the luxury this time around of knowing that we existed a little bit. And with the first record, we sort of, during the process of making the first album, we kind of found this third member, which is Lump. And Lump's a kind of a sort of furry Yeti-esque creature who's morphing into this record into other materials and textures. But I think because we had this character in place for this new record, I could start making music that was based in the sort of upside down parallel universe world of Lump. So that was a luxury.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that I was going to try to get into at some point in the conversation. I mean, why not jump into it now? But yeah, I mean, you guys currently are one of the few acts and artists out there right now that in a way, and I don't mean this to be detrimental, but in a way you have like a mascot kind of going for your project. And if I could describe it in my own words, as you say, it's like this furry, long-haired kind of creature with, almost like kind of a human shape in terms of like limb placement and everything. And it seems to, at least in terms of the iterations of like the new visuals, undergone a bit of an evolution. Maybe it's more colorful and slightly different shape this time around. I mean, could you explain the evolution of this Lump creature on this new record and what exactly that kind of represents at this point in the existence of Lump?
I'll take this one. Well, the first time, the reason Lump sort of came into being was that I really liked this, I guess you call him like an online artist called Esteban Diacono. And he makes these sort of, he makes lots of amazing things, but one of the things he makes is this kind of Yeti character. And so that was the first iteration of Lump, and that sort of formed the mascot style. And then we realized that it was quite a good distraction from mine and Mike's other work to like make it seem like there was something that was represented the band that wasn't us individually. And then that confused lots of people, and we lent into that confusion and have continued to confuse people by changing the lump character in every visual almost. And we've had various like lump, like real life lump mascots made, and we use them in the shows and things like that. And it's just sort of an amorphous thing. I mean, much like the band, it's sort of an amorphous thing that is really hard to describe, I think.
I mean, in a perfect way, you kind of describe like the functionality that it serves in terms of like how you want people to kind of perceive the art. But conceptually speaking, is the lump character a metaphor for anything, like beyond, just kind of what it serves in terms of like the loop that you're kind of throwing people for just by having the character there in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, it serves as like, funny enough, I've just done 2 videos for Lump that I animated, and very, very basically, I learned basically the software that Esteban uses, but I learned the free version of it, so not the like professional version. And in doing so, the videos have like huge glitches in them, like glitches from the machine that I could never figure out why, like the hair doesn't move the way I'm asking it to move or whatever. And in some ways, that is what the Lump character is about, is that it's sort of a glitchy, like the band, like it's not the none of the music's linear narrative. It's hard to explain. It's you sort of feel like it's nostalgic, but you can't really put your finger on what's nostalgic about it. And so like it's a constant kind of working process that I've like now experienced firsthand, trying to give Lump literal form and animation.
So you're talking about certain visuals that you're making and animating them yourself. Is this the case has this been the case for the Lump character in all or most of the visuals thus far? Because there are points where it looks like super, like hyper realistically, just like real in terms of just like its visuals. Is it always animated?
So the last video that came out, Gamma Ray, that's animated.
Oh, okay.
And then the rest are all costumes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, in terms of like speaking of this glitch in a way, do you feel like this is representative of, I don't know, like a lot of the lyrics that you're going into the new record with as well? Because a lot of the songs, at least to me, kind of boil down in a way to, I guess you could maybe describe them as glitches in the human condition in a way, or just sort of like our animal form in a way, or just kind of the ways in which it falls short or has faults, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, lyrically, certainly, which is all that I can speak for, but, I'm really interested in psychoanalysis. I was studying it recently. I've been a patient of psychoanalysis, and psychoanalysis at its best for me is a kind of description of the glitches in the human machine. And it's also like, like nonsense performance art and poetry. It's very beautiful. Trying to pin down and describe the underside of the human experience is really hard to do. So it comes out with all of these strange sort of distancing ways of describing it. So I'm using a lot of that language. And that's, also in tandem with the music that Mike makes, which is really kind of otherworldly, and he can talk about that more than I can.
Yeah, I mean, with Laura going into those themes that she just was, I mean, in what ways, Mike, I guess, were you trying to like mirror those concepts aesthetically and instrumentally across the new record?
Well, we could start by saying also that Lump was named by your, at the time, 5 or 6 year old niece or goddaughter. Sorry, is it your goddaughter or niece?
My goddaughter, yeah.
Yeah. And so, there's this playfulness, the word lump has lots of connotations that everyone, immediately thinks of when they read that word. But when it comes from a child perspective, then you've got this kind of immediate playfulness with the word. And then that's why it sort of became a character. We felt like it could become a character. So musically, there's this, you can play with these sort of bubbling, wonked out synths and these sort of, fairy tale kind of wibble machines and create this kind of texture, this kind of land, this spongy sort of backdrop to whatever Laura's going to bring to it. So my role, I think, is to find some element of creepy versus cute, prog versus pop, kind of horror suite backdrop, whatever that is, and then Laura kind of gives it focus and intelligence and beauty. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, what you described there as the origin is so fitting, because some of the aesthetics of the instrumentals, as well as just the visuals of the Lump character itself, it does kind of have almost like a children's book kind of quality to it, you know, in terms of just like how colorful it is and just kind of the imagination behind it.
Yeah, and it is colorful, and I think the sounds are colorful, and that's what I want to get from it anyway. This kind of, you're in this journey. If you look at it, listen to it as an album, you're in this journey, and within that journey there are different textures and colors sonically, but I mean, lyrically it can be taken so many different ways, and I don't actually know what those ways are when we're making the record. I mean, I mostly, well, in fact, in every case, same with the last record, it starts out with the music, so I'll work on some themes and some oddities, and then Laura comes in later. So then Laura comes here, and in this instance, we made it in this room, and she'll sit back there, just over there, and with a you know, pen and pad, and listen in real time, so you can get that sort of spontaneity straight away, which is quite amazingly impressive. So you'll try and decipher the playful, creepy code. Yeah, and then you bring the color, you know, and the imagery.
You know, it's kind of interesting to talk about this combination of prog and pop and so on and so forth. I mean, that's certainly there. I think a lot of, you know, listeners know you guys for your work in electronic music and folk music, which was super apparent on the first record. And as you say, things are like expanding on this new one. One of the tracks that like hit me the hardest, I think, was We Cannot Resist, which when I reviewed the record, I kind of described it as almost having like a Thin Lizzy kind of vibe to the way the guitars were rocking on that one. There was almost like something that seemed like, I don't know, like an 80s hard rock anthem quality to it at its core, but then you guys kind of feed it through this really gentle and sort of quirky lens, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that track is all over the place. You know, it's really, it's sort of, it wants to be a sort of huge kind of radio sort of pop hit. It's half in the world of your country and half in the world of our country, in terms of the US and the UK, and it's very confused. Plus, it kind of breaks down into this sort of whisper chant that leads us into the next moment on the album. It's also got elements of Gary Glitter, which you're probably not supposed to talk about, but that production.
I didn't press you on that.
It's got there's some glitter beat going on, you know. So make of that what
Laura, would you be able to speak to maybe the lyrics on that track? I mean, as Mike is kind of describing the process and at what point you sort of enter it, because your writing on that track in particular is just very snappy, very youthful. You know, your words are as fast moving as like the riffs and the beat on the song, and it seems like you really tried to do your best to consciously with your words match that energy.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can hear me kind of stumbling over the words in the take that we ended up using. I mean, I quite often come in and write as he's playing me the stuff, and then we record it straight away. So quite often it's the first or second take. So there's so much verbiage in that particular song. I think there's a couple of, like, if you're listening carefully, you can hear me kind of nearly stumble. I'll just wobble. But I was trying to, you know, I'm familiar, as we all are, with the kind of like image of like teenage lust. I know it's a really weird way to say that, but, you know, like some teenage love and the intensity of those feelings. And then, of course, as you get older, you realize the devastation that you experience at the end of that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of your life. So it does stay with you in a certain way. And then I was trying to find alternative ways of describing what that intensity is, yeah, using, I guess, the language of psychoanalysis, which is things like objects and untamed things, and what's sort of flying around the room in those kind of situations. So it all comes out a bit wonky.
I mean, for either of you who want to jump on this one, given almost like the sporadic nature of the sounds that Lump can take on, as Mike was sort of describing there a few minutes ago, at what point do you guys finally realize, like, sonically or conceptually with a record, we're done, we're finished? Because this can kind of go anywhere, be anything, or attempt anything as we're, embarking on a new album. But even though that is the case, there are very clear lyrical themes running throughout a lot of the tracks, and instrumentally, obviously, a lot of care is put into making many of the songs on the record segue into each other. So, as sporadic as it is, it does end up feeling like a holistic experience. And I guess, like, for this particular record, what are the veins and the sinew that I guess for you are kind of pulling it all together and making it not feel so random, even though it is attempting a lot of different things and touching down on a lot of different bases?
Well, I mean, Mike writes everything in the same key, which gives it, so it's a half step up, Mike, from the last album or something.
Oh yeah, I tried to pick it really the most annoying key possible for this. It's sort of like F sharps and E flats, and which is a mistake really, but we've had to go with it really. So that's.
Are you wait time? You're for real? Everything on this record is in the same key?
No, I mean they're based like. It's based around those kind of sharps and flats, and so they can segue, and they can sort of build out from each other and build in from each other. And we did that. The first record was more of a drone album where everything was in kind of an E or B, so you can get those fifths, and you can make that happen. And it's a nice tool to have to try and pick. In my kind of innocent bad piano playing, I thought I'll just try and use the black keys for everything, which didn't quite work out. But it helps, to when you start writing music, to sort of try and find some kind of boundaries and rules. But yeah, so we did try to keep things in that one area. You carry on, Laura.
Well, I mean, that was one boundary, and then I was using my notebook, which was full of psychoanalysis related things. So that was another boundary. And then I think we probably hit a time limit because I was making my record at the same time, or maybe was about to start making it properly. I'd finished writing it. So I think we literally ran out of time. And also I like a short record.
Then it's done.
It's done.
No, I mean, I think there's elements of that, but of us finding our time together and then realizing we've completed something that works magically somehow, but it does take on a form of a jigsaw puzzle later, I find, when you try and put a whole record together, and you do sort of find themes, even if they're not so upfront and obvious, but you kind of find themes within the music and the way sort of the timbre of the voice and things that can start to build a journey and take us back down and then take us to the end. I think we knew that Bloom at Night would be the opening to the record, and I think we knew that Phantom Limb would be the closer of the record. And I think once you have that, then it's all about just finding these energies in between.
Speaking of Bloom at Night, I would love to hear from Laura, like, at least from the standpoint of the psychoanalysis stuff that you're talking about, how lyrically that track plays into that idea, because at least from what I'm reading into it, it seems like there's some conscious efforts to, I don't know, like describe some sort of regret or emotional tension around this idea of vying for fame or entertaining or creating or gaining any kind of like mass attention of some sort.
Yeah, I think that's like a tension that exists in us all now, because we're all kind of, I mean, we're all the subject of the attention economy. I mean, to some extent, to whatever extent, but and I've always found it weird the way, as an artist, I guess I was late to social media, and I'm, I wouldn't now say that I dislike social media. I think I understand it and I get it and it's great, but I always found it weird, like the way that artists interact with people on their social media when it's such a sort of sinister, like capitalist thing. You're trying to garner their attention because you need the attention is the sort of cultural cachet that matters. And I'm a really deeply, deeply cynical person. So I think I'm just interested in those tensions. And Bloom at Night, Bloom at Night is a Freud reference. He talks about how the flower that blooms in the evening is no less beautiful than its daytime partner. As an example of somebody who, as a personality type, doesn't thrive in the attention of daylight, I guess. And so that was where the title came from, anyway.
I mean, speaking of that cynicism, I feel like that almost comes up on the song Paradise as well, in a way, and is framed in such a way where it comes off almost like dystopian. Yeah.
I think, there's a great South. I realized I think I took it from a South Park episode, but there's a great episode where Cartman starts wearing a box over his head so he can spend more time with his phone because he's got anxiety, which is just perfect South Park thing. But there is that kind of like, we're now dealing with, and actually psychoanalysis, like new things in psychoanalysis talk a lot about this new dimension of personality in the world. This new, I guess they call it the fourth dimension of personality, where you're aware of your online persona as well as your physical persona, how you're seen from other people, how you actually are. And I think that will have to start being included in, taken very seriously by people treating mental disorders. I think it probably already is. I don't know if any of you have looked at TikTok, but that is definitely
I've
a breeding ground for mental disorders.
I've spent a fair bit of time on TikTok. Probably.
And how are you doing?
Probably more than most 30-year-olds have. I think I'm doing okay with it. I will say there is definitely something attractive, but then also very disheartening about the algorithm on there, which I find to be like almost as far as social media goes, like Machiavellian, as opposed to any other kind of social media platform, because it's very good at throwing things in front of your face that are very specific to you, and you would be surprised, or at least I've been surprised at just like how little time I had to spend on there to be completely shut away from any and all things that TikTok is usually known for, in terms of like teenagers dancing and this, that, and the other thing. Mostly on there, my feed is entirely like weird memes and music TikTok and musicians doing things or producers making beats or something like that. And I don't really see too much of the other sides of TikTok, but like when you stumble across a certain section of it, you're surprised at how deep it runs. You'll find thousands of videos in this like weird niche hidden away corner that you didn't really know existed until maybe you accidentally stumbled upon a certain thing that it might have thrown in front of your face randomly. So it's kind of crazy. It's crazy. And also I think, disheartening also that the more I've been on it, the more I've seen other creators who may be addressing serious topics, or creators of color who are so easily and mercilessly harassed, sometimes more than they are on other platforms, depending on who's like getting shown their stuff, or having their stuff just like never shared or never put out there at all, or just like less so than maybe other creators were. It's really sort of odd what it decides to throw in front of you and why. Like, for example, the harassment thing, if maybe like some crazy racist Trump person ran across somebody's TikTok and said like some offensive stuff, their interaction with it may drive the app to send other people who like all of the things that they like over to the same video, just, through no other reason other than it's algorithmically saying, okay, this warranted an interaction. Let's send more people like this person over here to interact with it because this got them to interact with it. So it's a very weird social experiment that app is running. And, while I like a lot of the people and creativity on it, there are some very nasty ways about which it runs that's pretty disheartening.
Wow. Flipping hell.
Yeah. But to get into the maybe the musical functions of Paradise, because instrumentally, I think that's one of the more interesting tracks on the record. One of the most gripping things about it, I thought, were the vocal harmonies. I mean, you know, the instrumental is obviously very dark and brooding and quite dramatic, but there's like an eerie quality to the way that you harmonize on that track throughout the entire thing. And I guess, like, what was specifically your approach with that? Because it does sort of like add this strange sourness to Mike's instrumental that it just seems almost like very spacey and cultish. There's kind of that quality to it.
Well, it's quite a there's some, like, when melodies are quite flat like that, because it actually doesn't move that da, 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 da. It doesn't move very much. They're always really tempting to put 3-part harmonies on, but Mike has quite a good, well, he has a very clear vision about, he sort of uses me in a mercenary sense as an instrument. So he's quite clear and defined about what he wants from my voice. So that was probably Mike's call. I mean, and you use it for harmonic purposes in various places on the record, in a manipulated form.
Yeah, we didn't use it so much because we've done that kind of spectral rainbow Laura, using your voice that does kind of that on a few places on the record, which I love. We didn't do that on Paradise. It's really bold and really powerful and quite up there, and you're using your voice like with your full kind of body voice kind of thing, and it's really powerful. But I think what I find most interesting is those counter melodies, those kind of sort of slightly 60s or slightly 80s punky kind of sort of BVs that come in, and that's what makes the tune for me, with the telephone, da, da, da. That's like a sort of power chant, you know, while you're sort of the heaviest I've heard you sung on the lump stuff anyway. So maybe that's, Anthony, what you're talking about, those sort of parallel melodies.
Well, to sort of jump off of what you're describing there, or to get more of a feel for this, I mean, considering what Laura said, you know, about the place she's coming from lyrically on a lot of these tracks, for you as somebody who musically has a lot of plates spinning, and considering also the variety of sounds and music styles that can go into a lump record, when you're producing or pulling together ideas and instrumentals, like for you, you know, considering you're starting a lot of that momentum in the first place, what personally makes like a lump, you know, make something that you're working on a lump piece as opposed to, you know, an instrumental or a piece of music for any other thing that you might be sort of focusing on?
Oh, well, I guess we're allowed to do whatever we want in lump.
Hell yeah.
You know, that's what makes it so lumpy and so exciting. So, you know, we don't, you know, I've said that there are certain boundaries that we've set ourselves just so that we can maintain some kind of cohesiveness. But ultimately, that's our joy. You know, it's I imagine the same for you, Laura, where, you know, you can sort of be a bit more liberal and free and wild, and you can take chances and be experimental within certain genres, different genres within the same record, you know. Yeah. But there's a certain lumpiness for me that is that combination we talked about before of playful versus I don't know, slightly creepy and a bit awkward, and I quite like trying to put those sort of two things together. I don't know what Laura's going to sing when we're writing the music, or when I'm writing the music. So I don't know what themes are going to come up. And actually, often while you're singing, and we're recording, because we'll record the first take, because you'll be like, I've got it. And I'll have been sat here for an hour, not really doing anything or looking at you, just trying to, you know, not interact or interrupt the genius. And then so the first time I'm hearing the lyrics is the first time you're on the mic, and quite often that's the take we end up using as well. So I'm, you know, then we're both sat here with headphones and you're just over there, and I'm trying to take it all in at the same time. So it's wonderful. And then I'm thinking, how does this, you know, how does these textures and these sounds, how do they reflect what you're singing? But they must have meant something to you spontaneously to be able to frazzle into your brain and come out of your hand on the page. So I don't know where I'm going with this answer because I can't really remember the question, but there are no real, there's nothing really set in stone for what Lump may or may not be.
Okay. No, I mean, that's exhilarating and exciting, and will have us tuning into the future records, considering everything's going to be a surprise. From what you described there in terms of the creative dynamic and the point at which Laura comes in and does what she does, at that point, are things like the song structure pretty much set in stone, or based on maybe the themes and the writing that's going on? Like, are we building out choruses from there, or like, okay, we need to, make these statements, and then here comes the hook, and that's going to, be X, Y, or Z, or come at this length of time?
Well, I mean, I think there are some things that I've got in my mind that I was imagining to be the right arrangement, and then Laura will completely kick that out of the pitch or the park, and you'll do something that I never would have imagined, and then suddenly that's the hook and that's the chorus and that's the moment, So that's the joy when there's just sort of the two people. We have our very separate roles, and we try not to interfere too much with each other. So there is, in my mind, there is something set, but it gets unset. How do you feel?
I appreciate the depth that you guys are going into this with, but considering this is the second record, I guess, like, in each of your estimations, has this creative dynamic that you have going evolved at all or changed at all? Was there something about making this record? I know that, Mike, you said earlier that things felt a little more maybe comfortable this time around, like you knew what Lump was going into this second record, but was, anything again about the creative dynamic sort of changed or different, or maybe a bit more familiar, so that this time around things felt easier, or you felt the ability to take on a different challenge or attempt something that maybe you didn't before?
I think probably the fact that we knew each other. I mean, we made somewhat of a conscious, I made somewhat of a conscious effort to not get to know Mike that well, because I thought superstitiously that was what was so good about the first album, was that it was so random that I would go to this random guy's basement and sing these random lyrics over this really random music, and it turned out sort of well. And then the second time round, we'd gone on tour and we'd hung out a bunch more, but I'd also sort of kept a kind of professional boundary. But of course, in that time, we'd got to know each other and knew each other a bit better. But I think in getting to know each other better, it meant we could be more awkward in front of each other in a way. And, like me sitting at the back of that room, writing strange lyrics, and Mike like sitting for an hour waiting to do it. It's quite an awkward practice.
Well, I could leave the room, but I like to witness.
So it was a kind of comfortable familiarity, I guess, we had that helped. I think that the lyrically, I reached kind of depths of weirdness that I didn't know were possible for me, in exactly the same way as when, and it is kind of a similar setup, like sitting behind two psychoanalysis, which is a funny thing in itself. But the things that you say that you don't realize that you're saying, there's stuff in the lyrics that I listen back to and I'm like, I hope no one picks up on that. It's a really weird thing to say, which is a good thing, I think, for entertainment purposes.
What would you say, having said that, what would you feel like is one of the weirdest things that you say, or, topics you approach on this new record?
I think a lot about my balance of masculinity and femininity. And I think the line, "you tucked it in under your dress," is such a strange image. And it's sort of like suggestive, and I don't know, there's a lot of strange kind of gendered language that I'm using that's misplaced. And I think that's just totally to do with my inner sense of masculinity and femininity. And there's also a line that's like, you cross your legs to prevent emasculation. I'm obsessed, apparently, about, I don't know, men's violence. I don't know. on my own masculine side. I'm happy to go public with that. Need to be.
Well, what about a track lyrically like Oberon, for example? I mean, conceptually or metaphorically, what exactly at that point on the record, because it is a kind of a brief moment on the album, inspired you to kind of pull, again, at least metaphorically, on this like piece of medieval mythos, for the, I guess the idea and story of that track.
Well, that is the only thing that I think we were running out of time when that track was written, and Mike had this beautiful piece of music, and I couldn't. We needed something quickly, so I have a notebook that I have all the time, and at the front is Laura Marling notes, and at the back and flipped over is Lump, and so I just flipped it over to the Laura Marling notes, and Oberon is classically sort of, it would fit in my oeuvre, I guess. That's the story of Oberon and Titania from Midsummer Night's Dream, who are fighting over their sort of, I guess, custody of their child or care of their child. So that was so I sung some lines that I'd written for that song, and left it with Mike, and Mike chopped it up and totally rearranged it so it made no sense, which is why it has this kind of, I'm singing it with conviction as if it makes sense, but when you're listening to it, it doesn't make any sort of linear sense.
That's crazy. Thank you for thank you for going into the creative process on that, and also just, I don't know, the way that you kind of just casually described, oh, I have this notebook with my writing, and on the front is this, and on the flip side, reverse on the back, I have my secret lump notes. I think that says a lot about, I don't know, I guess creatively, at least at this point, your own personal duality in a way.
Yes, it nearly tore me in two, actually. Trying to differentiate the two personas was a really healthy practice, but yeah, it was exactly the metaphor of that notebook.
I mean, at least talking about it in retrospect, it seems like these two worlds, at least in your mind, are very clearly separated. But was there a point of, I don't know, like a growing pain where there was kind of a struggle to make sense of what the differences were in your mind in terms of those two different places that you're writing from?
There was occasions where the Laura Marling voice would pop up and like whack-a-mole, like Mike would just knock it on the head and point out that it had popped up. And it was always quite clear when it had popped up. But also I invested a lot in between the first album and the second one. I had invested a lot in Lump being the savior of, allowing me to be free of this persona that I've had since I was 18, creative persona. Since I was 16, actually, which I had at the time grown very tired of, and I was making Song for Our Daughter at the same time, and on the Song for Our Daughter sessions, I had a very, very tight throat, and I was going to see specialists and things, and I was trying to figure out what was wrong, and then in the Lump sessions, it completely disappeared, and so it was totally psychosomatic, which I think is. It sort of sums up what Lump meant to me at that time. Continues to.
Considering how Laura termed it there, Mike, in some of these earlier sessions, like, what would you, I guess, like, describe as the Laura Marling voice? And I guess, like, how exactly were you watching out for it and being like, maybe we need to try this instead, or it needs to be a different voice? How are you kind of encouraging that process?
I mean, the Laura Marling voice is insanely amazing, obviously, so it would be ridiculous to
obviously no offense to the Laura Marling voice.
Yeah. No, I mean, you have an incredible voice and phrasing and with Laura Marling. It's not like it's not Laura Marling, but there's an element of the way that you can sing with Lump that feels certainly more obviously English and from here, and that's something I was sort of aware of. But I felt like that you've been talking about this kind of different persona and having a Lump persona and feeling like experimenting in a different way. And there were moments where I can't remember a specific actual moment, but I might have said that's to Laura Marling, but because that would have been a bit rude. But I guess there's not much vibrato on this record, and you have this amazing use of vibrato within your LM world, and actually we did use it quite a lot on the last record, so I feel like I might have missed a trick with that. But I think there were just sort of some moments where it just felt, because you were perhaps working on your other record at the same time, it just felt like you'd sort of switched voices compared to what you've been singing for other songs that we'd already sort of worked out on this album. So it was nice to have this sort of cohesive voice of Lump, which is you. I wonder if people have noticed. I wonder if people have heard Lump and not realised it's you. But I mean, it is you. It so obviously is you, you know. But I mean, it's
sorry, I'm jumping in and I laugh just because like I had that exact experience listening to this new record just for a moment, because I think the first time I put it on, like with a lot of albums, I might just have it on in the background for the first time just to get a sense of it, just to like get a feel for the vibe before I listen to any song super specifically or intently. And at one point, I think I just like, it was late at night and I think I just lost place of what I was doing or what was happening. And I said, man, this sounds really good. It sounds really good like Laura Marling. It sounds like really good like a Laura Marling song or something, you know, the vocal. And I was like, wait, fuck, it is Laura Marling singing. And I had to remind myself because, yeah, the vocal tone and delivery a lot of the time is that different, you know? I mean, Laura obviously vocally doesn't sound like she's coming from another planet, but it does sound like a different tone, and it does sound like a different delivery that feels specific to this project. You know, the Laura Marling voice on a Lump project doesn't come off quite as frank, you know. It feels kind of distant and focused on other things, you know, other than some of the topics that you might usually catch on a Laura Marling record. And I think that kind of creates a different tone. And, you know, it's interesting to hear you kind of urge things to move in a different direction emotionally and vocally, because it does come across.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of a kind of a deadpanness that you've got, but there's this wit that comes with it as well. There's kind of a humour with it that you have on the LM stuff, but this is kind of more pronounced somehow with subtly with the Lump.
I think you always called me out, not called me out in an unkind way, but it was always obvious because it was too sincere. I think that was the kind of like,
oh yeah,
those were the moments where it was like, that doesn't feel very Lump because it's too kind of interior or something, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, I remember on Animal when you started trying to, I think because it was kind of this sort of slightly 90s dance tune and the synth line's a bit ridiculous, I think you started jokingly kind of singing lyrics in this particularly sort of British accent, and there was that kind of like, dance, dance, this is your last chance. And I think you were just sort of taking the piss, and I thought it was genius. So I think there were moments like, more of that, please. Yes, excellent. That's really odd. So stuff like that. Yeah, it's fun to kind of play with that, especially with people that, you know, with playing with your own other version of yourself. Pretty fun.
Mike, if you can go into this a little bit, considering what Laura was describing earlier as kind of like this professional distance that was being maintained over the course of, like, you know, Lump's first project and kind of the beginnings of the project. Again, considering that, like, what exactly initiated this, you know, creative outlet for both of you to begin with? You know, because as Laura said, there wasn't necessarily like this deep friendship there to sort of serve as the foundation for the initiation of this whole thing. So, like, you know, what exactly kind of sparked that desire to cross over in the first place?
Well, I've been a fan for you know, since you were making music. And I'm, you know, in this band called Tongue, and we had crossed paths before at festivals or something, and we did a radio show together about 10 years ago or something. We never really spoke, but we have a mutual friend who is Simon Ribchester, who plays guitar in Laura's band. And so I had an opportunity to meet you when you were playing a ridiculously large show supporting Neil Young in London. And there was an after party at a bowling alley. I'd had a glass of whiskey, and I think I said to you, I'm a fan of your music. I think you know of Tongue. Do you want to make some music together? It was just a opportunist moment. I was very surprised when you said, yeah, totally. Let's do it. Because, you know, I wasn't aware of you writing with other people at that point, but it was just an innocent opportunity to see if you'd be up for working with me, which you were. And it was scary because I hadn't had anything at all prepared whatsoever. And I didn't know you were going to be in the studio like 2 days later and be up for that. So, and I think that's what kickstarted it off. I had the beginnings of a film soundtrack that never got used for a film, which became Late to the Flight. And that was the first track we worked on. I kind of had that sort of in the bag with flutes and things. And because I was so unprepared with what I might want to do, we kind of brought that up on the Pro Tools. And within an hour and a half, you kind of had that whole song down. We hadn't even said hello. I think I fumbled around trying to make a cup of coffee. I was a bit sort of nervous. And then we had this track, and then you sort of went, and I sort of sat here thinking, this sounds amazing. That was so lovely and organic. And, so we carried on, and it's been like that since. And, as Laura said, we have become better friends since, but it is it's a working relationship, which is great as well. It means that when you're in here, we just get straight back into that zone. It's great till we're on tour, and then we're covered in cocaine.
Considering the fact that you guys have 2 records out now, and in both of your minds, probably there's like a stronger conception of what Lump is and can be at this point. Like, what does that mean for both of you in terms of like what Lump 3 could be shaping up like?
Well, we don't know yet, do we? We don't know. I mean,
I have been thinking about it this week because I realized we put out single. I mean, like totally like most people, we put out singles before the record came out. And then when the record came out, I listened to it again. And I was like, it's a shame to pull it apart and like only give out bits of it. Kind of ruins the experience of listening to it properly. But and then it made me think that it would be so good to release. I don't know, everyone says this, actually, it's such a boring thing to say, but release it as a visual film somehow. Or have it soundtrack something that's appropriate, because then you really listen and experience something on multiple levels. Well,
and you've been fully delving into the world of visual gubbins.
Yeah.
So you're excited by that. I mean, I have been working on some ideas in the Lump 3 folder, and they sound nothing like Lump 1 or 2 at the moment. So I'm excited if and when we do decide to do something else. I think what's great about as I said before about Lump is that I think it can go in any directions, as long as it evokes imagery and takes you on some kind of possible out of body experience, and I think that's for me anyway. That's what we've sort of managed to do. At least that's how I feel. And I would like to do good things come in 3s, and it would be nice to have a 3rd. But I mean, I don't imagine it to be like a massive pop record. I'd like to go down the other avenue. But we shouldn't be talking at all about this because we don't even know yet.
Yeah, you don't know yet, and you've already bridged into dance music on the latest record. Who knows? You could return to that again. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. But I think one thing that is great about our project is we sort of talked about this before with each other, but it's no one ever asked us to do the first record. We asked each other to do it. No one knew about it. No industry people, no friends. And nobody knew we were doing another record except for the pair of us until we'd kind of were happy that there was a record that existed. And that's kind of a nice feeling. And it feels like when you first started making music for the debut album for your band or whatever, when no one ever knew it existed, you didn't know it existed. And it's something quite nice, even though we're talking about record 3 when we probably shouldn't, is to just get on with it as and when it might be a thing. And then you'll hear about it when we know it's done.
Yeah, I mean, I actually kind of like that quality about this project for both of you, because, no matter what each of you are doing, it seems like that weird little secret thing in your pocket that you always have going on that maybe not all the fans know about, but like people who really care about what each of you do, like they're aware of it.
Yeah.
So, pandemic badness withstanding, are there, big plans to tour behind this LP right now and take the Lump project further into the faces of the fans and all of that?
There are. I mean, it's been really hard for a super niche band. I'm sure lots of niche bands are finding this, but like the just everything's booked, and we're low on the priority list. So we have a couple of shows in the UK this month, and they're like small club shows, and then hopefully we'll do some more next year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a handful of small club shows, but I'm looking forward to getting back in those small clubs and that be allowed and that be okay, and to present this. It's what we haven't said is that when we took the last record live, it kind of took on a new identity. The album kind of morphed into this bigger, bombastic, sort of shoegazy area that neither of us realised would happen. And I feel like an element of the writing of this record was based on some of the energy that happened with taking the last record live. So we are taking this one live at the end of this month and the beginning of next month, for like a handful of shows around the UK. When that's amazing and badass and everyone's wants to take it to the arenas, then we'll hit the world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the higher energy of this record is going to sound even more high energy in the live sessions.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, Mike, Laura, thank you guys very much for coming on and talking to us about the new record and just being open books and great guests.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you for taking time out of your evenings as well. I'm sure you want to go get some sleep.
Well, still a bit early. Could read a book, have a beer. So
that's true.
Anytime.
That's true. It's just like 8:30, so not too late.
Yeah, we'll be all right.
All right. You guys have a good one.